Legal experts say Trump has few, if any, options to change the course of the outcome of the vote in states across the country. But that hasn't stopped him from once again today falsely claiming that he won the election. Tonight in Georgia, the governor has certified the vote. Joe Biden is the winner by slightly more than 12,000 votes. This after an unprecedented hand count audit of the ballots.
State law now requires the governor's office to formalize the certification, which paves the way for the Trump campaign to pursue other legal options in a separate recount if they choose.
Meanwhile, President Trump made a brief appearance today to talk about prescription drug prices. He once again falsely proclaimed victory in the election.
I won, by the way, but, we'll find that out. Almost 74 million votes.
But when making an announcement on a policy lowering drug prices, Trump seemingly acknowledged Biden's win.
There'll never be anything like this. I just hope they keep it. I hope they have the courage to keep it.
Trump did not take any questions.
Shame on you!
Also arriving at the White House today, Republican leaders of the Michigan legislature who were mobbed by protesters at the airport, angry after reports the two men were summoned to Washington by Trump to overturn the vote in Michigan, a state the president lost by more than 150,000 votes. Even if Trump somehow flipped the state, 16 electoral votes would not change the outcome of the race. Tonight, both GOP leaders were seen leaving the White House and released a statement saying they would uphold the Michigan vote. Meanwhile, on his 78th birthday, President-elect Biden met with the two Democratic leaders he'll partner with next year.
In my Oval Office, you're mi casa, you casa.
But there is growing frustration inside his transition team as President Trump continues to block access to federal agencies and resources.
I just think it's totally irresponsible.
Now, top House Democrats are demanding the head of the General Services Administration, Emily Murphy, brief them by Monday on why she has not declared Mr. Biden the winner and allow the transition to begin. Her actions are having, quote, grave effects, including undermining the orderly transfer of power.
Delays or issues with the transition could cost lives in the form of pandemic. They could make us less prepared to respond to natural disasters. It could delay distribution of vaccines. That's why this is dangerous.
Tennessee Republican Lamar Alexander broke with many of his colleagues today and urged the White House to provide the Biden team all access necessary so that both sides are ready on day one. And Biden aides remain frustrated by the president's refusal to concede so far and point out that the lack of official sign-off from the GSA means they don't have access to secure facilities or even the State Department to know what or what should not be said to world leaders on those calls of congratulations to President-elect Biden. Live in the newsroom, I'm Tom Waite.